On Christmas Day of 2024, a fascinating thing happened within the Grand Theft Auto community. A leak. It wasn't just any leak. In fact, it had nothing to do with the upcoming Grand Theft Auto 6, the game everyone and their mother is hungry for and eagerly awaiting more news on. The leak I'm talking about is related to 20-year-old game design documents detailing particular aspects of Grand Theft Auto Advance, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, and most importantly, the original design document for the first planned iteration of Grand Theft Auto Online, dated May 31st, 2001. For full transparency, I was made aware of this leak by simply browsing the r/gaming leaks and rumors subreddit, a place I've been visiting for years now because it's just a convenient community-run news aggregate for everything like this, back when this specific thread was on the front page of it. This post directs to an article on GTA Focal, which did not have a direct link to the leak itself, which is probably smart on their part because they might have gotten in trouble otherwise, but the always helpful comment section did. Sadly, that link is no longer functional though, so don't bother using it. Luckily, I was early to the party and managed to snag a download. Now, some of you are probably eager to get a hold of these documents yourself, and maybe even see screenshots of them in this video. But, out of caution, I'm not gonna provide either of those things, because the original download link doesn't even work anymore, and uploads and screenshots of these documents might have a chance of being taken down, so I can't actually show you anything direct without potentially putting this video at risk. If you absolutely need to see everything with your own eyes, I can point you in the right direction, or you can find another video that risks it, or maybe someone in the comments might be helpful. The best I'll be able to do though is show you a screenshot of the folder itself and what the files look like in a list. They are in PDF format, and as you can see, the document for GTA Online is by far the biggest, and for good reason. It's a whopping 58 pages. However, there is something inside this leak that I can show you because it's not a video game document. It's a message from the original uploader of the leak, who goes by FrankieLiberty on the GTA forums. And this is where things get a little strange. I know you're probably interested in hearing the contents of these documents, and I will go into that, but honestly, I find the reason for this leak to be just as interesting. Hear me out on this. FrankieLiberty joined GTA forums on the day they leaked the document, and on both the forums and within the leak itself as the README file that you see at the bottom there, Frankie has a message detailing why they decided to leak these documents in the first place, and essentially, this leak is retaliation against an alleged black market game design document seller, or fence, who had supposedly acquired these documents from Rockstar employees to sell to the highest bidders, and then share that profit with said employee who provided them. Now, this angered Frankie, who decided to take power away from the seller by leaking these documents. But don't take my word for it, here's the message itself, which I will read aloud so no one misses anything, and it is a long one. FrankieLiberty says, "This post is intended to spread content freely to the community and as a sign of protest against a certain individual who goes by John Doe, notorious in the Rockstar Games collectors groups. This shady individual has been able to secure a lot of content over the years from ex-developers, ranging from design assets to sensitive documents, acting as a fence to protect the identities of the ex-developers who got greedy to begin with. He certainly hasn't been shy about flexing as much either. His MO has been to either promise others content that he didn't own at an increased price based on another posting, or buying stuff for cheap and then reselling it at 10 times the price. He's a known fence for illegal, stolen content from Rockstar, and his greed has caused previous leaks, such as those of the Manhunt 1 and 2 early builds. John Doe has proudly flexed his contacts, his insight, and the stuff he's been able to gather for years. He's also engaged in further illegal acts, such as requesting personal identification documents from buyers during sales, while claiming that he's interested in the security of said assets. Of course, we all know that's all a lie, because even if he plays victim, as if he's giving back to the community by selling stolen documents, game builds, and press kits, and making it possible only under secrecy by saying that if anything leaks, he'd lose his hard-earned trust and contacts, the man is not at all concerned with security, legality, or even morals. He could have chosen the righteous path of releasing the content freely for the community to access, or at the very least, abide by his promise of exclusivity towards the buyers. Instead, John Doe has been cleverly interacting with different members of our community from different groups, making sure to never sell the same thing to the same group. A man worried about keeping things secret would certainly avoid such risks, no? Well, John Doe has instead been profiting massively for years by selling and reselling content to many members and gouging the market by offering higher or lower prices depending on who he's offering to. Select ex-developers have made a killing off his sales while being entirely protected with him acting as a fence. John Doe has easily made tens of thousands of dollars, oftentimes reselling the same asset priced at e.g. $2,000 to 5 different parties. That cannot stand, and shouldn't stand any longer. John Doe has done enough damage to his buyers, to Rockstar, and to our whole community by being a greed-driven, deeply irresponsible, bad-faith actor who thinks of themselves as the Robin Hood of stolen property, giving back to select few from our community while really actually being the town's slut for anyone who can pay the price. Today, some of John Doe's assets will be devalued as he won't be able to sell them any longer for profits. So to the community, here you may have internal documents for GTA San Andreas, GTA Advance, GTA Vice City Stories, and last but not least, a GTA Online design document dated 2001. He still sits on beta builds, production asset discs, and a plethora of documents, ranging from design to some signed by company heads, so his ties go deep. This is your chance to come clean, John Doe. As you can see, it's a pretty accusatory statement. Now, some of you might be shocked to hear about the very idea of anyone, selling game design documents of decades-old games for up to 4-figure prices, and some of you are probably totally unsurprised. Grand Theft Auto is a major franchise and one of the most important intellectual properties in the history of gaming. So it stands to reason that there are plenty of people who take the preservation of everything related to GTA very seriously, especially older paraphernalia that is difficult or damn near impossible to get, including these documents that very few people would reasonably have access to. Thus, it would be in the community's best interest to simply release them for free. However, when something is in the best interest of a community, that usually means it can be sold for a pretty penny by those who only care about profit as well. Of course, it would be unfair to completely run away with these accusations as the total truth without at least listening to what this John Doe has to say in response. And he did actually reply in the same thread that contained Frankie's message. So, let's see what he has to say. Again, this is a long one, so I'm only going to read the middle third because it's the most important part. And I'm going to clean up the response a tiny bit because, well, his grammar is atrocious, but the unedited message will be on screen while I am reading aloud. So, John Doe responds. Long story short, due to some connections I got myself involved with some individuals, and I was approached and essentially provoked, completely due to my own faults as a person, to deal with some material unrelated to merchandise, if you will. I have collected and sold for a very, very long time now, and I deal with hundreds upon hundreds of people. A large chunk are good people, but there's a few bad apples creating fake accounts and using proxies. It is my responsibility to be able to filter out the good from the bad, which I'm usually good at. Sometimes things can get intense though, and this can sometimes test the nature of a human, and basically, I fucked up. As a human being, I have committed mistakes, and I do wish to also solve them, which is the reason I am making this post. What I am trying to achieve with this post is simply saying that I will try to own up to my mistakes. There is no need for me to try and get into a debate with the author of this post because it is basically feeding more gasoline into the fire. Now, in the first section of his post, John explains that he had found himself in some pretty dire financial situations. And assuming John's story is true, I can sympathize with being in a desperate position in life and needing to resort to equally desperate measures to prevent disaster. But if you wish to take accountability for your actions, I would say that the first thing you should do after acknowledging those actions is to stop doing them. A few other posters in the thread asked John to freely share whatever he has, and judging from various responses in the thread, it looks like he is unwilling to do that. However, there are a few other users who have dealt with John Doe, saying they never felt pressured to buy anything and were given what they considered to be fair deals. One user, named Universe Twisters, made an interesting post that actually goes into detail about dealing with John Doe, specifically over these very documents contained in the leak. They said, "I dealt with John Doe throughout this year. I bought the GTA Advance, GTA Vice City Stories, and GTA 3 Online design document. The GTA Advance one was fine. He asked for 800 and I gave him 700, I believe. The GTA Vice City Stories one was only a partial. He didn't say it was or implied it was. I thought I was paying 800 or 700 whatever for a full one and I just got a couple of pages. He refunded me partially for it. The GTA 3 Online one I had to sign a contract just to buy. I can't pull it up right now because he deleted the link to it on Discord, but it was to the effect of, by purchasing this, I agree not to share its contents. What really irked me the most is how, even though I paid for these docs, I couldn't show them off or record its contents in the sake of preservation/beta research. But now that the cat is out of the bag, I suppose it won't be long until its contents are gone over with a fine-tooth comb and itemized. Which is nice because it's what I wanted to do from the start, but couldn't under the threat of not only violating a contract, but also potentially losing out on future purchases. For example, who cares about a GTA Advance design document when I could potentially get a GTA San Andreas design document? When the thing got leaked, I contacted him for a refund because I was under the impression I was the only one getting the copies of whatever. I got it pretty promptly. I recommend everyone who bought from him ask for a refund. Now, the idea of signing a contract for a game design document sale is pretty silly. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I think contracts don't protect the sale of what is technically stolen goods. Just because John Doe was given the documents by an employee doesn't mean they aren't stolen, because it's doubtful that employee is the owner of the intellectual property. In another post further into the thread, Universe Twisters clarifies that they also believe John Doe should just release the remainder of whatever he has, which possibly includes beta builds of Midnight Club 2. And in another post, they also clarify that, as far as they know, John Doe's source, who sells him the documents, can only acquire them in parts, which is why the documents in the leak are mostly incomplete. The discussion on GTA forums continues on for a bit with other small tidbits of information, and John Doe himself trying desperately to defend himself, but frankly doing a pretty bad job. He continues to state that he acknowledges his wrongdoings, but beyond that proceeds to deny, even when multiple people in the thread have stated doing business with him. I know it's easy to blame John Doe for his actions, and I would agree he does deserve some blame, because after all, he is selling pretty significant items of video game history that aren't truly his, and manipulating his buyers into silence with contracts that probably aren't legally valid, despite selling the same thing to multiple people within the same community, so he's not even following his own standards for secrecy. But I believe John Doe's actions are also a symptom of a greater topic, Rockstar's own refusal to share this content. They are known for being very, very secretive, and it's that secrecy that led to these unnecessary black market game design document deals in the first place, where only people with the money to spend are given access to something that could help the whole community in their wish to preserve history. The smaller the amount of people who have access, the easier it is for these things to be lost. The game industry has had a terrible preservation problem for decades, and there's no benefit to keeping this stuff locked away in a filing cabinet that might get unceremoniously tossed into a landfill one day. Of course, not every single tiny detail needs to be released to the public, but there's no downside to giving fans insight into how the creative process for some of the biggest and most important games of all time worked. Numerous other companies in the industry have already adopted the practice of releasing concept art and sometimes even design books for their biggest titles. Sony, Bethesda, From Software, BioWare, and especially Square Enix, who releases Ultimanias for every Final Fantasy, featuring not only art, but information from design documents and interviews with developers on how they made the game. Releasing a book like this is comparable to a behind-the-scenes featurette for a movie, and it's something that the biggest fans love and appreciate. I can only hope that someone comes around to releasing these things publicly, whether it's Rockstar themselves or another leaker. Now, beyond all that, there's the content of the leak itself. As I mentioned earlier, they are Grand Theft Auto Advance, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, and most importantly, the original design document for the first planned iteration of Grand Theft Auto Online, dated May 31st, 2001. While I can describe the details of the leaks, I'm going to be cautious and not show direct screenshots, because Rockstar, or someone, might be taking down uploads, because the original archive link to the leaks is already gone. I know this is annoying, but it is what it is. I'm sure someone else is willing to risk it and show screenshots in case you absolutely, positively need to see them. Or someone in the comments section might be willing to point you in the right direction. Anyway, let's start off with Grand Theft Auto Advance, which is separated into two documents. The first one has a proper cover page by Digital Eclipse, and it's titled Planned Improvements for Final Product, and dated January 8th, 2003. The second page is an introduction explaining the game, but right after that is a current state of the game section that states at the time of writing the document the game was about 50% done, but also using 95% of the game's budgeted 128 megabit ROM size. So there will be features mentioned in an earlier design document that are either not implemented or functioning poorly. Page 3 details the game's royalty structure, set at $1.25 per unit for the first 500,000 units, then increased to $1.50 per unit after that. As of this document's writing, GTA Advance was set for a completion date of June 16, 2003. The game ended up releasing in October 2004. The key features of the game listed here are 3 islands to explore, over 70 missions, a multiplayer deathmatch with up to 4 players, many vehicles to jack, a variety of music for radio stations, and several original characters not seen in other GTA titles. Page 4 states that Rockstar themselves will provide or loan art, animation, and sound assets from appropriate sources, and all customer and quality assurance testing as well. Page 5 is entirely a milestone approval form dated for March 4th, 2002, which authorizes a payment of $45,000 to Crawfish Interactive, who was making GTA 3 Advance before they closed in November 2002, so all of those assets were simply moved over to GTA Advance by Digital Eclipse. Page 6 is entirely an explanation of milestones and how much money was given for each one, totaling $250,000 across all of development. Pages 7 and 8 are just copies of milestone invoices given to Crawfish before they closed. Page 9 is the start of a new document that is titled Budget Proposal and dated December 12, 2002. The remaining 2 pages after this are repeats of the milestone pages. The second document does not have a proper cover page, just a blank with Rockstar's logo on it at the very top. Page 2 discusses the utilities used in development of the game, including tools that convert file types, a tool to process sprites, a tool for importing game script files, and other things. Page 3 is Technical Risk Assessment, which goes into detail about the game's programming challenges. First is speed, which requires a middle ground to be found in sprite placement so that the game won't encounter constant slowdowns, but there's also enough sprites so the city feels complex. RAM is also an issue because it directly dictates how vehicles work and how many are present. And then there's ROM, which is Available Cart Space, and it's a fairly tight fit and has caused some items to be removed. Multiplayer bugs is a big issue, and is where testing feedback is most important and also most time-consuming. Scripting is an area where they were getting more familiar, but as of writing the document, they weren't prepared for increasing speed on the engine just yet. Physics is a crucial aspect to the game and is necessary to improve. At the time of writing, the most extreme physics problem was vehicle steering, because their pivot point was in the center of the sprite, which makes them feel as though they are sliding. So a lot of tweaking will be needed here. The next page continues with other hurdles like sprite glitching, problems with 3D coordinates, sound and music slowdown, and potential design risks, because design is being driven by what is functional in the scripting language, not by what is planned for the story. So it's the story that needs to fit the missions, not vice versa. The next 3 pages are a detailed flowchart of how a mission will function and how a story can play into it. And the remaining 2 pages after that are more hurdles to address, such as mission scripting, multiplayer missions, rampages, special vehicle missions, hidden packages, stunts, music, and planned control scheme. This finishes the second GTA Advanced document. Now, as you can see, both documents are details that most people might not be interested in, being all about financials and development obstacles. But some people are interested in that kind of thing, including me. But since financials are included here, it is understandable Rockstar doesn't want this coming out. It does kinda make me wonder if they would give less of a shit about the leak if it just didn't include this. Next is Vice City Stories, and it's a lengthy 30 pages, but it seems to be multiple fragments put together in one document, so there are pages missing and things are not terribly coherent. The first 5 pages are maps showing the locations of safe houses and various pickups such as health, armor, and weapons. The next 4 pages after that is mission details, specifically story summaries, completion conditions, and failure conditions. The page after that is an incomplete rewards page listing reward tiers for collecting a certain amount of packages and completing other optional goals, like finishing all story missions or finding X amount of cars to import. No actual rewards are listed, so it needed to be updated as time of writing. The next 7 pages after that is all about multiplayer scenarios and game modes. The next 9 pages details all the odd jobs you accept around the city, such as paramedic, vigilante, taxi driver, etc., and the remaining 4 pages is non-story missions and miscellaneous information, mostly incomplete it seems. Despite being longer, I think the Vice City Stories document is the least interesting because it's clearly an early draft and contains very little information that I would consider eye-opening. Now we're heading to the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas document, which might surprise you because it's not going to be about what you might think it's about. It's 17 pages entirely dedicated to various girlfriends that were, at one point, intended to be in the game. There's a total of 8 girlfriends in this document, with details including their name, how they're introduced to the player, how much they like the player at first meeting, how to increase their affection, how to decrease their affection, what they do to you if you piss them off, whether or not they have a safe house mechanic, conditions to get them to have sex with you, and how much self-respect they have. Most of them even have pictures of real-life women as references for what their design is supposed to resemble or evoke. For example, girlfriend number 2 is Bobby LaQueef. Yes, that is actually what it says. Rockstar is not known for subtlety. She's introduced to the player at the weightlifting area of the beach, where you have to impress her with your iron-pumping abilities. She's specifically described as, and I'm quoting here, a white preppy daddy's girl who is a muscle slut. She's never in an exclusive relationship, and again, I'm quoting, nothing gets her going more than the smell of the men's changing rooms. Another notable girlfriend in this document is Honey G, because she's meant to be the superstar R&B and hip-hop hitmaker. I'm not going to go into detail about every girlfriend, partially to keep this video a reasonable length, and because I'm honestly not 100% sure if that will affect the visibility of this video in the future. You'll just have to read it yourself if you can get your hands on it. I will say though, the full San Andreas design document is probably hundreds of pages long, and I can only imagine how much it would be sold for, assuming it's for sale. Now we're heading to the real prize of this leak. A whopping 58-page long document detailing the intended original incarnation of Grand Theft Auto Online, developed by Barking Dog Studios, now known as Rockstar Vancouver. The document is dated May 31st, 2001, and it has a proper cover page and a full table of contents. But here's the thing. Even though it's 58 pages, it's still not the complete document. The table of contents shows the full thing is 111 pages long, so we're still missing the entire second half. The first page after the table of contents, meaning page 6, is an introduction and glossary of terms. It explicitly states that GTA Online seeks to move the series into a sustained online environment where players will carve out their own fame and power in a GTA world shared by thousands of other players. Sounds pretty great and ambitious for the time period. It goes on to define terms like world, zone, server, mirror server, big world, zone world, faction, and reputation. Page 8 goes into detail about general game features. Specifically, it points out full immersion into a unique GTA world, fleshed out characters, an in-depth skill system, limited interior locations, a reflexive random mission generator that will continually pump out sensible objectives for the player to do, criminal factions, faction advantages and disadvantages, instant messaging and voice communication, clothing, and meeting places. This all lays out exactly how big this game is going to be. It's very clear that Rockstar intended for this game to be a pretty traditional MMO, but simply set in a modern GTA world. Page 10 goes into detail about game flow. It states that core design philosophy of GTA Online is to strike a balance between the action the series is known for and the character development features found in contemporary MMORPGs. It says that games where players can wield guns and run around and shoot indiscriminately already exist, and GTAO will instead focus on missions of various complexity using a character the player has personal investment in from training and improving them. The page also goes into character growth, stating they would toss out traditional RPG elements such as levels and instead focus on skills that increase over time. Presumably the skills you actually use as you use them, so that your character evolves in the way that you're actually playing them. Another big point this page makes is that the game will have highs and lows for the player to experience, meaning their fortunes will rise and fall periodically. It also discusses the faction system, where a weighted ranking system will put an upper limit on how many characters of a specific rank can exist simultaneously in one faction. As a player rises in rank, they gain access to more rewarding missions that also pose more risk. Players of high rank can use their power to gain access to weapons and equipment, hand them over to lower rank players in the same faction, and use that as a way of expressing their position, basically turning twinking into a viable in-game action. Pages 12 through 14 go into detail about what the player sees as they start the game, showing a flowchart of all the screens and what they do. On page 15, we're introduced to character creation, where players can name their character and shuffle their base attribute points. Melee and ranged attack attributes are calculated from related attributes, and choosing a faction will alter your attributes even further. And beyond that, they can choose additional skills and personalize the look of their character. Now, the 8 attributes are strength, dexterity, agility, charisma, intelligence, perception, ranged attack, and melee attack, with the final 2 being decided on how many points are in the other attributes. Ranged attack depends on dexterity and perception, melee attack depends on strength and agility. After that, the document describes stat checks and skill checks, which work pretty much exactly how other RPGs do it. The higher the appropriate stat or skill is, the more likely you'll pass the check. Pages 20 and 21 actually list out all of the planned base skills and additional skills available to players. Base skills includes things like climbing, concealment, driving, first aid, hot wiring, jumping, lockpicking, pickpocketing, running, swimming, and more. And additional skills includes appraisal, bribery, counterfeiting, demolition, disguise, forgery, gunsmithing, hacking, intimidation, pharmacology, and others. Pages 22 to 28 are definitions of skills and how they work and what they do. For example, appraisal examines an item to ascertain its worth and provide a description. Concealment hides items and weapons from other players. Chemistry is for making poison, explosives, and more, etc. For some skills, a formula is provided to show how calculations will work for passing a check relating to that skill. On page 28 and 29, the document talks about the HUD, and as you might expect, it's designed to present more information than a normal GTA game, including a chat window and which weapons are equipped to which hand. On page 30, there's a brief explanation of factions and reputation, and the latter is more of a trade-off, because as you gain reputation with one faction, you lose reputation with another and become more of a target. Pages 31 to 35 give information on each faction, including example illustrations. The info contains faction territory, specialties, advantages, disadvantages, skill bonuses, and basic background. For example, the Italian mob is based downtown in the warehouses and docks. Their specialties are fencing, protection rackets, counterfeiting, and gambling, and advantages to joining them are reduced jail time, larger influence over corrupt cops, and large, well-defended territory. Disadvantages, however, are being hated by all other gangs and very slow progress through ranks. If you join the mob, you get bonuses to fencing, intimidation, counterfeiting, and gambling skills, and apparently your character learns Italian. Pages 36 and 37 describe how faction territory and headquarters work. Territory for each faction features a minimum area of the city, and that minimum territory cannot be taken away. However, it is possible to add to that minimum territory through completion of missions, meaning territory can temporarily expand. The headquarters section simply describes each hub for each faction, and they'll serve as a natural meeting place and save point. Obviously, you can only enter the headquarters of a faction if you have positive reputation with them. Pages 38 through 40 have example illustrations of various headquarters, as well as a description on how to change factions. It's only possible to change factions when you have a near zero reputation with the faction you're currently in. There's also an informal reputation system, which impacts how players interact with each other. If you rip off another player, that player can put you on a snitch board to dissuade others from dealing with you. Conversely, if you are trustworthy, players can state that too, so others aren't apprehensive of you. Page 42 details interactions between players. The game is basically based on an honor system, and player killing is allowed by default, so it's up to players themselves to maintain their own balance. There's also a description of a contextual right-click menu to prevent the HUD from being a massive clutter. Pages 43 and 44 describe movement, pursuit, and hiding, which basically work the same as they do in regular games. There's also wanted lists and rap sheets where players who constantly break the law and escape capture are put on a most wanted list. The more crimes you commit, the higher up the list you are. And rap sheets are basically for bragging rights, listing all crimes the player committed and which they were and were not arrested for. Pages 45 through 48 go into detail about the combat system, which is greatly overhauled from the regular single-player GTA games to better implement the RPG elements of the game. Getting hit in different body parts causes different amounts of HP loss, and there's a ton of modifiers to keep combat fair and consistent, including armor, attributes, attack speed, penetration, and weight. Pages 49 and 50 detail the inventory system. In most MMOs, players have a set inventory, regardless of what they're wearing. But here, the size of your inventory depends on your clothes. If you're naked, you obviously have no pockets and thus can't hold anything. So you need to wear clothes and even backpacks to maximize potential storage space. There are also multiple body inventory points that allow you to store or equip items on those areas, including head, eyes, ears, neck, back, torso, waist, wrist, hands, fingers, legs, ankles, and feet. There's also a public inventory system where there will be places that anyone can use for storage, but some will be locked, such as a car's trunk, and others will not. This is where concealment comes in handy because you'll be able to place an important item in a public storage space but still hide it from people using concealment. And they'll just see an empty slot and won't know anything is there unless they try to fill the storage space themselves. But even if they do find out, their own concealment must be high enough to even see what it is. So a high concealment skill would be very useful for habitual hoarders. Page 51 details drowning, ambulances, hospitals, and arrests, which more or less function the same as they do in normal games. But page 52 talks about court, which is a new system in GTA-O. The player will stand before a judge, plead guilty or not guilty to crimes, and if you plead not guilty, this is where your legal skill kicks in and performs a check to see if you plead successfully. If found guilty, the player will actually serve jail time, which will vary depending on the severity of your crimes. Pages 53 and 54 detail idling, emoting, and controls. Page 55 talks about communication methods, including basic text chat, pagers, phones, bulletin board systems, and limited audio communication by way of canned audio files. The final 3 pages of this document discuss the city, starting off with interiors and the challenges of programming them, and the various classes of interiors, including liquor store, restaurant, convenience store, mansion, police station, gun store, bank, jewelry store, car dealership, and small and large garages. The final section of the document specifically discusses ownership of spaces and how players can own 4 classes of property, and you would have to pay rent monthly to continue owning them. Apartments exist, and it is possible for other players to break into yours, but most buildings will be in faction territory, and they would need high enough stats to pull it off. Similarly, garages are also possible to break into, but will also be in faction territory to discourage casual, rampant theft. Townhouses are the biggest pieces of property a player can own and will be the most difficult to break into, and they will have a single-car garage built in. And this ends the document included in the leak, but as I mentioned, the full table of contents says the whole thing is 111 pages, so we are still missing the entire second half. Again, according to GTA Forums poster Universe Twisters, John Doe's own contact who acquires these documents to give to him supposedly can only get them in pieces, so it's unknown if we will ever see the second half of GTA Online's design manuscript. As you can tell, it was pretty damn ambitious for the time. In fact, it was so ambitious, it had more mechanics and systems than the actual GTA Online we would end up getting 12 years after this document was written. As I mentioned before, Rockstar is secretive, and sadly that secrecy combined with the GTA community's thirst for knowledge has created a small but active black market of sorts of people who pay hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars for these documents and possibly even early builds of games. It's a bit sad to think that someone would take advantage of such a niche community for a quick buck, but like I said earlier, if something is in the best interest of a community, then it is something that can be bought and sold as well. I can't predict when or where another leak will pop up or what it will contain, but hopefully it's enough to quell this weird black market stuff. The last thing this already small hobby needs is more people trying to abuse the dedication of its members for cash. This concludes my thoughts on the recent GTA leaks. Before you go, please check out my merch store if you haven't already. As of right now, I have 2 shirt designs, a sliced skull and a tribute to Hironobu Sakaguchi, creator of the Final Fantasy series. I also have a beanie with my logo embroidered on it, great for the cold weather. Both shirt designs are available in lightweight fabric and heavyweight cotton. I've already received samples of everything for quality checking, and I can confirm they look great in person. If you're interested, visit mildconviction.com or check the store tab of my YouTube channel page. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.